Hello, everyone. Eric Prince here, Marion West. Today, I am very happy to be joined by Slavoj Žižek, a Slovenian philosopher. He's the international director at the Birkbeck Institute for Humanities, University of London, a visiting professor at New York University, a senior researcher at the Department of Philosophy at the University of Ljubljana in Slovenia, the author of numerous books on philosophy, a frequent contributor to various publications and podcasts, and a contributing editor at Compact Magazine. Our conversation today is primarily going to center on his latest book, Freedom, A Disease Without Cure, which was released with Bloomsbury Publishing this October. Professor Žižek, thanks so much for joining me. And I'd like
Thank you. It's a big honor for me.
Thank you so much. So I'd like to start off, I think, by asking you what you've published dozens of books. What prompted you to undertake this particular book project at this point in time?
It's a very good and tough question. You know why? Many of my friends claim that, yeah, they like the book, but the book left them unsatisfied. And that was my purpose. You know, for me, especially today, I will say something horrible, especially for some so-called leftists. Freedom is not one of those words which automatically draw the right division. Like, for example, if I say torture, at least for the majority of normal people, it means you are supposed to be against, and so on and so on. Freedom is a word which is used and misused in so many ways. It's like democracy. I don't think if you evoke democracy today, it brings in the right distinction. It allows you correct orientation. To give you an extreme example, you know that South Korea is simply ROK, Republic of Korea. North Korea is the Democratic Republic of Korea. I'm not now entering the debate, do they mean it seriously or whatever? Or to give you from the opposite side of the political spectrum, the example, you know, Milei, the newly elected Argentinian anarcho-capitalist leader, he is all for freedom. And then when he was asked how he will fight poverty, his main answer was, then he withdraw it, it was to allow individuals, poor individuals, to sell their unwanted children and their organs, kidneys, and so on. Okay, this is some kind of a new freedom, but haha, you know what I mean. So it's a very delicate question today. Freedom, what do you mean by freedom? What kind of freedom? And especially, are there kinds of freedom which, although in some abstract sense they are freedoms, they give you more choice, effectively they limit your freedom. For example from the United States, Obamacare. You are young, you are not old, but old enough to remember probably the debate.
Sure.
The right-wing attack on Obamacare, although it was very modest, watered down, was that it limits your choice. The state will prescribe you which doctor to say, to use, to go to, and so on. Now, again, in some abstract sense, this is up to a point only true. On the other hand, for me, concrete freedom, and I'm not talking now high theory, but simply here as an individual, it's part of concrete freedom, freedom in this concrete life, that I, of course, worry getting cancer or whatever, but I don't have to be in a panic in advance. I know if this happens, some whatever insurance organized by state, by whomever, will take care of me as much as possible. This here in Slovenia is one of the things that people, although nobody has real nostalgia for communist Yugoslavia, but that people remember fondly. You know, so freedom always needs a concrete background. And to finish, so that I don't get lost again, my point is that I'm not against liberalism. As a good, in some sense, very limited Marxist, I highly appreciate abstract freedoms. I'm not playing the stupid Stalinist game in bourgeois societies. Freedom is only abstract. Yeah, and what? And under Stalin, they had concrete freedom or what? No. What I'm saying is that let's take again freedom to develop your potentials and so on and so on. I think that not to worry about who will pay for your healthcare, at least at some elementary level, or the right to free education, for example. Isn't this something that makes your actual life much more free? So I'm here without prejudices. I turn to ordinary people and I try to keep them in my mind. And what always worries me is not this. I'm not impressed by these big events, 1 million people in Cairo Square in Istanbul protesting. I'm obsessed by, I think the American term is the morning after the drunken enthusiasm is over. How will people experience the change when normal daily life returns? And here, to see how far I'm ready to go, I'm even tempted to say that there are cases where, sorry for these terms, leftists and liberals will lynch me, that a moderate dictatorship, there are circumstances, can work better than in certain situations, than simple multi-party democracy. My big case here, and I debated with people there, Rwanda, they have a relatively reasonable, soft dictator, but he brought peace in the sense that you don't remember this, decades ago, the big slaughter, Hutus, Tutsis, and so on. That's kept under control. The situation is stable, economy is progressing, and as leftist friends admitted to me, if you introduce their full multi-party freedom, the tragedy is that the political parties will be again formed on the base of ethnic communities, which means a catastrophe. So you see why people are not satisfied. I don't propose simple solution. In my old age, I'm returning from Marx to Hegel, and Hegel's big worry was always, we have a great new idea, democracy, equality, name it, solidarity. But when you try to implement it, how can things go wrong? How can even the best ideas go wrong? Look at the 20th century. In spite of all horrors that followed, it's clear, if you know the history of October Revolution, that this was a genuine popular movement. Just look what the Bolsheviks did at the beginning with feminine rights, legalizing homosexuality, and so on. But wait a couple of years, you get Comrade Stalin, And it's too cheap to say, oh, this was just a deviation. No, a critical analysis should show it was there, the possibility, at least, the space of it from the beginning. And I'm more radical here. I would say it was already in Marx. His notion of freedom was too abstract in the Hegelian sense. It sounds well, but the moment you locate this abstraction into concrete social circumstances, horrible things can emerge. So again, I try to be, you know how I define myself? Maybe you heard it. I love it so that I provoke everybody. Moderately conservative communist. Communist because I still believe that our mega problems from ecology onwards can only be not even solved, but at least confronted in a productive way so that we really cope with them through some larger transnational forms of cooperation. We need market, but market should be controlled, regulated, and so on. But at the same time, conservative, why moderate conservative? Often, even liberals like this idea of we have a wonderful general measure, equality and so on, then there is an economic catastrophe or whatever. Moderate conservatives, they can be very intelligent. I have friends among them. Always think in this term, but be very careful. What can go wrong? This is where I stood today. I'm just a skeptic, if you ask me.
So on the subject of some of these friends you're talking about, we interviewed Patrick Deneen at the magazine a couple of months ago, and I know you're involved with Compact, which I think a lot of people think is an interesting thing, and maybe certain people have certain assumptions about your worldview and such, and then they see you up there. And I read a couple of your pieces there, including Wokeness is Here to Stay recently. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with Compact and some of the people there, where you have common ground and where you have differences of opinion, and sort of how your involvement got started with that project?
Now my answer will surprise you. All I do is, I know that they are relatively open, Compact. They don't care about limits of political correctness and all that stuff. And I also know that they're open to different orientations, much more than other similar publications. So I don't want to sound impolite because I like publishing there. You find a certain echo, but I don't follow it regularly. I just want a space where I can be heard. And I like this because in other media, you cannot imagine how, one wrong word can ruin everything. And what is missing now is the sense of irony or playing with ambiguities and so on. Let me give you one example of what I'm opposed to. I have many black friends, and please don't take this in this racist way.
Oh, I would.
No, what I mean is that a classical anti-Semite, isn't this his or her standard line? But some of my friends are Jews.
Sure.
I don't mean it in this way. I mean that I regularly experience this. When I speak with black friends, we make dirty jokes against each other, and especially about one's own ethnic group and so on. I don't dare to repeat them here. And I find in them, precisely in many black intellectuals, and a wonderful sense of self-irony. They are struggling for black emancipation, freedom, and so on. But at the same time, with no illusion, with great sense of irony, brutally attacking their own, brutally analyzing their own inconsistencies. But then the problem I have is with white liberals who often tell me, but you cannot talk like this. What if they, the blacks, will miss the irony? What if the effect will be racist? And then I explode. My reply to these white liberals is, sorry, you are a racist. You are treating them like idiots. as if they need protection, you know. No, they are wonderful people. They tell you the truth. To give you an extreme example, I'm repeating it often lately, but it's kind of enlightening for me. All around the world, the troubles we have, what really makes me depressive, you will not believe, is not the usual suspects, Ukraine, Putin, Gaza, and so on, but South Africa. I asked a black lady at the big debate in London, an old African National Congress fighter. A simple question I asked her. I read in our media that South Africa is becoming a failed state, blah, blah, blah. Do you have an answer? What should I tell white critics of South Africa who repeat this? And she not only said, yes, the country is in a very deep crisis, she was honest enough to blame also the new black ruling class. And then she said something horrible. She said that, where I sympathize with her, I'm a brutal guy, not torturing people in the sense of in theory, I can analyze everything, but this made me almost crying. She said that among the black poor majority now, more and more, you know which spontaneous ideology is asserting itself? Nostalgia for apartheid. Because she said the economic situation was more stable, you didn't have the freedoms, but you could count on economy was relatively efficient, you could count on surviving, living peacefully your life, plus precisely because it was an authoritarian police state, there was social stability, no disorders. Now it's chaotic, it's even more corruption, and so on and so on. So my point here is not as fake leftists attacked me. Oh, so I am against decolonization. No, but this is not just South Africa. Look at Zimbabwe. Look at incredible corruption in Angola, where communists won the civil war. And now the social division between poor and rich is greater than ever. You see, I like to approach all these embarrassing questions. If we don't do it, the struggle for authentic Black emancipation has no chance.
So, Professor, you alluded to this a little bit when you were talking about Obamacare and people being able to pursue freedom a bit if they have sort of a baseline. And as you probably have followed closely in the United States, and there's been a debate all the way back to the Nixon administration, perhaps before, but it was reignited by Andrew Yang with universal basic income. So there are various discussions in the American political context. So back to your book, obviously it's in English. People like myself in the United States are reading it. In terms of perhaps practical political change or as it applies to the politics of the United States today, what do you hope readers in the United States take away from your book?
I would add to the book, if there were to be another subtitle, a new one, the same as for the subtitle of my next book, Surplus Enjoyment or what? A guide for the non-perplexed. Many people today, in one or another form, are not perplexed. They simply think, yes, this kind of a fake, cynical realism. That's how things are. Let's just follow them. And my main point is not so much to wave with the new flag, to provide easy solutions, but to confuse people. I'm not afraid to use confuse in the productive sense, to make them see how complex the situation is. Let me give you an example here. As you maybe, or probably, or I'm sure heard, some 6 years ago when Trump appeared, I said provocatively, vote for Trump.
I have a question about that, but yeah, we can push it
although
now.
I made it clear, look at the chapter in, I forgot which of my previous books, where I talk about this. I compared Trump to a person who, let's say we are in a room, nice educated people talking, and somebody just kneels down and starts to shit there, you know. So I knew who he is. My point is just that my hope was that United States were a strong enough democracy, not in any pathetic sense, but in the sense that the state power is not too centralized, many organizations of civil life, that Trump, precisely through his madness, will do two things. He will shake the established political order, and I feel vindicated here. I don't think there would have been the phenomenon of Bernie Sanders democratic socialism without the background of Trump. You know, people all of a sudden saw that the old American establishment, this traditional division, Republicans, Democrats, and they are for me more or less like Coca-Cola and Diet and Pepsi, sorry, not real, that the political tilt changed. So I still think that it was a necessary experience. Now I am horrified at the very prospect of getting Trump again, because now again, you will get a shocking confession from me. And I spoke with people who, I know strange people, you know, with people who knew people in Pentagon. And they told me, don't underestimate something. You remember the 6th of January demonstrations and so on.
Yeah, we've had a lot of articles about it
everybody.
recently.
But do you remember something else that when it was that uncertain situation, will Trump recognize the electoral result or not? There was a note. It appeared empty, vague, but it was basically very clear from the army headquarters. They said, we will not, the army, US Army, will not tolerate public disorder and threat to the constitutional procedures and so on and so on. I think they played a positive role here. And I don't exclude this because I don't like panic. United States are a great productive state, but the ideological situation now is really a danger for democracy. You know what? Why? Usually people claim, oh, democracy means plurality, different opinions coexist. Yes, but on the basis only of certain shared values and especially trust in procedures. Like you complain, but if people voted in a certain way, this is what will happen. Remember, when Al Gore lost to George Bush the Younger, it was all that problem with Florida up and down. But nonetheless, once it was established, even if it was only a couple of hundred votes, you accept it. Now, I think, and I'm not saying anything really new, United States are approaching a potential, let's hope, only ideological civil war where different parties simply no longer speak the same language. And the left has to rethink this. For me, the tragedy of the 6th of January is that what many leftists dreamt about, what is the dream of every traditional leftist? People, ordinary people, together, thousands of them storm the very seat of power. Sorry, guys, the populist right did it. And my solution here is a solution that now he's getting old, but still I have a fond opinion of Bernie Sanders. You know, the big statement of Bernie Sanders already almost a decade ago, his advice to Democrats was, don't fall into this centrist trap of who will get the middle vote. Trump didn't do this, and he won. He said our true target should be those poor white people who otherwise vote for Trump. In other words, I think that, now comes my next talk, I think that today, when the new populist right is getting more and more brutal, vulgar, tasteless, speaking the language of violence and so on, I think, and I have two figures here, Bernie Sanders and in England, Jeremiah Corbyn, although I don't agree with him about Ukraine and so on. But what I want to say is this. The new populist right is, they are transgressive in this vulgar sense of breaking the rules, obscenity, and so on. And I think today's progressive left strategy should be, don't laugh, please, should be moral, silent, moral majority, and decency. The message of left should not be, whenever there is a disorder, we are there, let's subvert things. No, the left is paying the price, especially in Europe, for identifying with this. We bring disorder, we take risks, and so on. No, the new right is doing this.
Professor, I want to read a passage from your book that I think sort of has bearing on this discussion, and maybe you can kind of comment as to it in the context of what you're saying.
Yeah.
So you write, quote, "Here we stumble upon another paradox of political freedom. We should be very precise with regard to what the majority really wants. What if they don't really want to be free in the sense of really choosing in elections? What if they care more about the appearance of freedom? The rare moments when people really have to make a hard choice are usually perceived as the moments of crisis of democracy, the moments of anxiety when the very continuous order is threatened," end quote.
Yes, I agree with, it's not a great shock if I say that I agree with myself.
Right.
Because I really try to get off all the illusions, also of the following illusion. The entire Marxist tradition, also in the 20th century, transformed into anti-colonial struggle and so on, they are looking for some social agent on which we can rely, like they have the authentic experience, you know. You ask them and the truth of what goes on is, as it were, inscribed into their situation. For Marx, this was the working class. For, in the middle of 20th century, China, Mao Zedong, these were the poor farmers. That's why in Cultural Revolution, literally millions of student city intellectuals were being sent for a year or two to the countryside to learn from ordinary people. I don't think that today there is any privileged emancipatory subject like this, so that then you can play the game, we are all corrupted and so on, seduced, but they really know what's our situation. No, I think that I even, in one of my texts, here is what I think, did something horrible for traditional leftists. I turned around, you know, that well-known Abraham Lincoln statement, you can deceive some people all the time, all people sometime, but you cannot deceive all the people all the time. I think you can. I disagree with Lincoln. And I think that a majority of the people, and I respect them up to a point, I am the same. You don't want to live in a permanent state of emergency. You want somebody in power whom you can vaguely trust, who brings stability to life, not just a person, also a political movement. And in today's complexity, We need also specialists and so on. Look at ecology. No, ordinary people, how can they know? We need science, not just to fight global warming and other things. Now, even don't know if it's really global warming. It's more what happens in the oceans and so on. We need science and specialists just to define, just to articulate the problem. So I think this idea of some basic level of trust into ordinary people, they know what is going on, has to be abandoned. I think that the moments where majority is not deceived are very rare. And that's my horrible hypothesis, that the majority wants the appearance of freedom. By this, I mean they want to be given free choice, but at the same time, they count on what? On that they will be in some refined way, not as a direct order, told what to choose. It's like a free choice, but if you tell me what to choose. And moments when this no longer functions are true revolutionary moments. They happen, but they are dangerous. You know, things can go wrong. Walter Benjamin, the Frankfurt School companion, said it clearly. When the old is disintegrating and the new is not yet here, you get fascism, you get horrible times, and so on. No? So I am generally a pessimist in the sense that I don't expect a lot from the future, especially I don't believe in this old kind of progressism of or Marxist teleology. History may be complicated, but there is a logic which pushes us towards a more solidary future. No, there is not. The future is radically contingent. It depends on us.
So back a little bit to what you were talking about Bernie Sanders. So in 2019, you wrote a piece in The Independent sort of discussing, as you're doing now, your sort of controversial decision to back Trump with the idea that it'll galvanize discussions on the left. And I think you wrote in 2019, quote, "This is why the only true struggle going on today is taking place within the Democratic Party itself," end quote, with the likes of Bernie Sanders perhaps putting forward pretty different viewpoints. Are you surprised to see Bernie Sanders and most of the Democratic establishment or Democratic Party politicians back Biden so strongly for re-election, to the point of, obviously you probably wouldn't like Dean Phillips very much, but even tried to kind of not have him on the ballot? In some respects, could one argue that the Democratic Party is coalescing behind Biden more than ever?
Yeah, but I think this can end tragically. I must confess, but listen, like
Sure.
my knowledge of the American politics is very limited. But nonetheless, I must say that many of my leftist friends admit to me now that with regard to economic and social politics, Biden effectively was the most radical social democratic political leader in the United States, more than Obama, I
Sure.
think.
Yeah,
No?
yeah, I
For
think that's
example,
clear.
this is an empty symbolic gesture. But nonetheless, you remember when Biden went personally to support the auto workers' strike.
Mm-hmm.
This
I do,
is
of course.
unheard of. Also, what he did in the fight against racism and all other stuff, I will not go into it, women's rights and so on. Now, the question is, and I am really a pessimist here. First, I think that his also relative, Biden's economic success comes from good experts around him. What my sources, maybe you have other sources, are telling me is that there are people like that great old lady who is not an idiot, Janet Yellen, the,
Mhm.
as I would put it in European terms, finance minister.
Sure.
That, yeah,
Secretary of the
she's
Treasury.
doing good. Now the problem is Israel and Gaza. I absolutely condemn Hamas attack, but I think what Israel is doing now is something extremely dangerous. They are obviously using this situation to establish from the river to the sea large Israel, and they are consciously pushing Palestinians into a desperate situation in which the only agent now appearing to really fight for them is Hamas. You know who is my source here? Once I gave a speech along these lines in Germany, and I was interrupted as anti-Semite, whatever. My answer was, now it will be another shock, maybe not for you, but for my superficial leftist friends. I told them, trust chiefs of secret police. They're not automatically reactionary. The only really rational opinion that I am hearing lately in Israel is from two ex-bosses, one of Mossad, Ephraim Halevi, the other from Aleman, or how it's called, ex-boss of Shin Bet. It's extremely rational. They say the only solution for Israel is don't just treat Palestinians, there are millions of them controlled by Israel, as an obstacle. Give them some hope. Provide them a solution. If we don't do this, the situation will go on. And you know what really worries me? Till now, I exaggerate a little bit, but basically, anti-Semitism was a European problem. And then up to a point from late 19th century, a problem in Arab countries. But now it's spreading all around. Are we aware that in countries like from Indonesia to Latin America and so on, anti-Semitism is exploding? The situation is getting really dangerous. And the most dangerous thing in all this, I think, is how this immensely helped Putin, who now insists on this parallel. Ukraine is Israel. In the same way that Ukraine persecuted Russians in the Donetsk region, Israel is persecuting Palestinians in Gaza and all that stuff. And this, since I'm, of course, in Ukraine on Ukrainian side, this is a mega tragedy. I mean, and I cannot avoid the impression that Hamas and Hamas pseudo-radicals and the hardliners, not just Netanyahu, but two evil guys around him, Ben Gvir and who is no Gostrich, I forgot that finance minister, no, that they are consciously provoking war because they think the war will enable them to have a large Israel. I think this is something so dangerous that's going on that it really makes me afraid. But back to Biden. Here, I simply don't get it. I don't why he's doing what he's doing. I think the standard explanation to win, he thought he needs the support of Jewish capital and so on. I tend to believe more a rumor that I heard from my friends who have friends who have friends who at the end, one of them is in White House, that Biden was worried about giving the impression of a weak, old, senile leader. And he thought that this aggressive support of Israel will bring him the image of, you know, I can be tough, I can be a warrior, and so on and so on. The true tragedy of Hamas attack is for me that Do people remember what went on in Israel half a year ago? Wonderful thing, almost a popular rebellion against Netanyahu about, the autonomy of the Supreme Court and so on. This disappeared now practically. Slowly it's returning. So I think the true tragedy there is this, how should I call it? Although I'm not in a conspiracy theory, I'm not, as I ironically put somewhere, I don't believe that Israeli hardliners and Hamas leaders are on the phone every day. How should we help each other and so on? But objectively, they are supporting each other because they both want war. And this is extremely dangerous. But to make, another point, I like this one of mine. Sometimes I think I say something nice, maybe about Bernie Sanders. Neoconservatives today still like to say the traditional morality is disappearing, everything is just this pseudo-leftist cultural Marxism transgression. No, look at Donald Trump. I always repeat this. If there ever was a postmodern politician, postmodern in the sense of violating rules of decency, obscene jokes, blah, blah, sophistry, inconsistent stances, it's Donald Trump. If there ever was a traditional, very traditional moralist, simple, decent person, it's Bernie Sanders. That would be my point.
What do you say to, as you said before, you see the Republican and Democratic parties as like Coca-Cola and Pepsi. What do you say to people on the populist right who say that they and the ideas they represent are a bigger challenge to the established order than the Bernie Sanders acolytes?
I think this is simply not true because, Bernie Sanders may appear sometimes to simplify things, but he is not an idiot. He is well aware of something. That's why he insisted against Hillary. And here I remain a traditional.
Were you disappointed when he endorsed Hillary Clinton?
I took it as a desperate measure, but what I would have done if I were him is respectfully, I would stay out. His mega success, this is for me, because people always say the right wing manipulates images and so on. Probably it wasn't manipulated, but the true miracle was you remember Biden's inauguration.
Sure. Famous photo.
How Sanders stole the whole show, and with those just sitting there alone. Wasn't this a living proof that Biden inauguration was, in a deepest sense of the term, not economico-political, but in view of the historical logic, reactionary? They thought Trump is a contingent disorder. Let's return to democratic normality. No, Trump for me is a sign, a reaction of something that went wrong in this predominant welfare state, soft social democracy order itself. I think that Trump got something. Intuitively, he understood it correctly. What now my leftist friend, Yanis Varoufakis, likes to point out, what he calls, I have some problems with this term, new techno-feudalism. The idea being that today we no longer are in capitalism the way we knew it. We are more in some kind of neo-feudal order where these mega corporations which privately own our commons, the space within which we exchange things, we interact, they really rule and even oppress ordinary small, I still believe in this, I'm naive, ordinary small creative capitalists. So Varoufakis, a radical leftist, even says maybe the left will have to make a pact with small creative capitalists against these mega corporations. And let's be clear, these mega corporations, from Bill Gates to I don't know whom, are in majority, I know Elon Musk is a special case, are in majority closer to democratic establishment. So my idea is here a very modest one, not a big revolution, but when things get really dangerous, yes, we are in a situation to be blackmailed. When we talk about human rights, fight against racism, sexism, we have to make a strategic pact with democratic establishment. But at the same time, we should all the time be aware that the true problem is this old liberal democratic embodied in the Democratic Party consensus. And that Trump is for me a secondary phenomenon. It's just a reaction to this.
So I want to, in our remaining time, bring it back to the book a little bit. So I have I have a couple things I want to ask you from the book. So there are a lot of interesting points that you bring up in the book, and a lot of things that I found myself thinking about. But one that sort of stuck out to me was your discussion of the 1991 Mimi Rogers film, The Rapture.
My God, one of my favorite movies.
Yeah. So that after I finished reading, there were a couple of things I was thinking about, but I kept thinking about that film and your treatment of it. I might not, I have a quotation, but I might not read it. And maybe just for those who haven't read the book, can you talk about why you discussed that film, why you like it so much, and why it features in Freedom and Disease Without Cure?
Basically, my reading of that film, so let's make propaganda for the next book coming out now in 2-3 months, Christian Atheism, you know. Mm-hmm. I think that I am an atheist, but literally a Christian atheist. And I think that the way that film at the end articulates the despair of the lady played by Mimi Rogers, when you know what she said. No, God was too mean towards me. No, I will not say I like Christ, God, or whatever. That this was, in the deepest sense, a Christian gesture. A Christian gesture in the sense of, for me, I simplify it to the utmost. Christianity is for me so radical because its message is not whatever goes wrong on this earth, there is an old guy sitting up there and he will take care that at the end it all ends well. No, God, by dying on the cross, gives us freedom. The big quote, one of the big quotes from the Bible for me is, you know, when it's clear that Christ will die and some, I don't know which one, a pupil follower asked him, but how we will know that you will return? And the answer is, when there will be love between the two of you, I will be there. So I totally reject all that bullshit second coming. Second coming is here in the Holy Ghost or Spirit, I don't know, and Holy Spirit is just the community of believers. But there is no external guarantee. You don't count on God. God, Holy Ghost, and this is unique in Christianity. Holy Ghost means when we interact as humans in an emancipatory way. So God is here in this sense to provoke my friend. But do you know that I have people who agree with me? You know who is my great friend? You know him. You must have heard about him years ago. Rowan Williams, the ex-Archbishop of Canterbury. Mm-hmm. He likes this idea of mine that the Holy Spirit is the first original form of the Communist Party, which means, you know, when Christ says, if you don't hate your mother, your father, you are not my follower. I don't think this means you must really hate your father, mother. Father, mother stand here for social hierarchy. And what Christ means is that there is a possibility of an egalitarian, emancipatory community that bypasses social hierarchy. That's why, again, that movie is so shocking for me. It's again a Rapture. It's again a very tricky movie. And the trick is to recognize Christianity at its purest in what appears as a rejection of God.
Very interesting. And I know that's a film that's captivated a lot of people. I think Roger Ebert, it was his favorite film of 1991. So I'm glad
Really? So I'm not alone because
yeah,
I
no,
thought that I'm
it's a
more or less
film
alone.
that yeah, it's a film that really got a lot of people excited. So I wanted to ask you about that. And I also want to ask you about another point in your book that ties into what you were talking about earlier
Yeah.
about your appreciation of Hegel. And well, maybe I'm going to ask you this one.
Okay.
So you quote the preface of Hegel, a biography, and you say that in an otherwise incorrect preface, the one sentence that is correct is the first one, which is that, quote, Hegel is one of those thinkers that just about all educated people think they know something about, end quote. So I want to have a two-part question. The first part is, how do people most commonly, in your view, misunderstand Hegel? And then secondly, what other major thinkers, including perhaps ones that you also address in the book, whether that's Kant or others, do you think are most commonly misunderstood in our discourse today?
First, let me conclude with a general pessimism. I
Sure.
think the whole history of philosophy is a history of misunderstandings. Sometimes these misunderstandings are productive, sometimes not. It's clear, it's already a joke among people who really know and love philosophy that Aristotle misunderstood Plato. Then let's go on in modern philosophy. Descartes misunderstood medieval thought. Then Kant misunderstood in his critical turn Leibniz. Hegel misunderstood Kant. And then it goes really crazy. Marx obviously misunderstood Hegel. Marx fell into this trap of reading Hegel's absolute knowing as this cheap paradox. You know, that guy, a professor from Berlin, he thought he knows everything. The mind of God, all reality. No, I think Hegel is, that's why he's so actual today. Hegel is the greatest thinker of contingency. He doesn't want to deduce everything. What Hegel calls absolute knowing means you run through all available options and you see there is no way out. That the situation is self-enclosed, but at some point with your acts, you will have to break out. That's why in his, at the very, in the preface of his philosophy of right, Hegel says something incredible. He says philosophy can only paint gray on gray. When a certain form of life is disintegrating, philosophy can conceptualize it. Philosophy cannot paint any positive utopian. It's always wrong if it paints any positive utopian image of the future. Hegel is absolutely open towards the future. He actively prohibits these utopian plans of how will future society be and so on and so on. For Hegel, this is why, ironically, against Marxists who like this word that Marx turned around Hegel and put Hegel on materialist legs. I think that now we need a materialist return from Marx back to Hegel. Marx was too much caught into this teleology of history. But our situation today, where, my God, where there are so many options, which are not just variations, but radically different possibilities, like ecology, what will happen, or artificial intelligence. Will
Yes,
we
I'm glad you
be
mentioned that.
human? What levels control this opens, and so on. And these are not, again, just variations. These are, and now that's my latest passion. Now I'm in an intense dialogue with many, I don't want to boast with names, but with many big names in quantum physics, popularizer, but not the, and they all admit this parallel that now we are in a kind of a, you know what they call in quantum physics, superposition of possibilities, no? This may happen, and if this happens, we will be telling ourselves one story. If another thing happens, we are in this type of open situation. Who knows what will happen? It's a radically open situation. We cannot rely on any figure of what in my Lacanian jargon I call the big other, you know, historical perspective of communism or whatever. Communism itself is a deeply ambiguous notion. It's a nice idea, but I don't think you can simply play the game. It went wrong because of historical contingencies. And we have numerous versions of this, like some Western Marxists say, sorry, revolution took place in the wrong country. It should have happened in the developed West. Well, it didn't. So then others put the blame on Stalin. Like, if only Lenin were to survive a couple of years more, made a pact with Trotsky, then what? I don't, maybe it would have been a little bit better, the Soviet Union. But I don't think it would have been some ideal democratic socialism and so on. And this is what I want to install in people today. I offer no guarantee. My message is not trust history somehow. No, somehow things will work out well. No, we don't know. It all depends on us. The situation is open, and this is for me the true radical freedom. The limited everyday freedom is the freedom which needs rules, and it's a great thing. Like two of us talking freely here, which means we obey the rules of language, we obey the basic rules of decency. Like I like to provoke people with vulgarities. Like I will not tell you if I had trouble defecating before. It's not a place for this. But then there are moments when you have to make difficult, radical decisions. And I think we are approaching that moment, and I have no revolutionary enthusiasm here. Things can go totally wrong. We have to be very careful.
So as we wrap up, the last question I want to ask you was inspired by your chapter. Is there such a thing as free will? And you talk about, you write, we can live a meaningful life in virtual reality. We may even be in virtual reality already, end quote. And as I'm reading this, I'm reading an article in the British press about a girl, the police investigating the first case of maybe you heard about it, of a girl's avatar in virtual reality world experiencing sexual assault. And many of us, myself, unfortunately, sometimes included, am spending 11 hours a day in front of some sort of screen. To what extent do we already live in a virtual reality world?
I think first, it's very good that you brought this point, because I'm not only talking about political freedom. I also try, especially if I remember correctly, in the second chapter of the book, to link political freedom to this, I'm almost tempted to say, basic metaphysical question. Is there, in view of today's cognitive sciences and so on, in what sense are we free? Is there free will? Because, you know, some people link this with quantum physics, like everything is not necessity, there is contingency, but freedom is not contingency. Freedom doesn't mean it was a chance. Freedom means you freely decided something. So is there a space for this in our new theory of relativity, quantum physics universe. I don't want to spoil the pleasure of readers, but I will just conclude with two things. First, yes, I think there is, and it's linked to how to think about consequences of quantum physics, this idea of unfinished open universe. But so this is the first point, that freedom has a chance. It's too easy to, even ethically, to claim we are totally determined, don't worry about freedom. But second thing, which is crucial for me, and here I agree with the guy with whom I have a couple of dialogues. I don't agree with him politically, but here he is Yuval Noah Harari, the big
Sure.
bestseller.
You quote him in the book.
Made a good point where he says that till now, till brain sciences and all the ways to control or manipulate our mind, the question of freedom was of real status of freedom. Is a freedom just user's illusion, but all it's determined by our neuronal processes and so on, was just a purely metaphysical, theoretical question. We all knew, I don't care. In everyday life, I want to feel free. But today, the two levels intersect because the modes of using results of cognitive sciences, brain manipulation, and so on, to control our thoughts are already a fact. In our countries also, although this is from what I hear, most developed in China. So this idea that through the result of cognitive sciences, we can, not just in this primitive sense by influencing your opinion, we can seriously not only limit your freedom, but even more. We can manipulate you so that we determine what choices you make without you even being aware of it. This is a big threat for me. And again, I don't have a simple final answer. I just carefully follow what goes on. My ultimate fear is what I called in another book of mine, wired brain. The idea that a computer or external mechanism will be able to directly interact with our line of thought. On the one hand, this appears wonderful. My God, I will think, turn on the light, just think, not say. The light will turn on. But remember, what goes out goes also in. What if the machine will be able to do the opposite and implant something into our brain without me being aware of it? That's why my formula is that the most dangerous unfreedom is the unfreedom which experiences itself as freedom. You know where I got this message? From a Chinese friend of mine who told me that he remembers almost fondly 30, 40 years ago when, after the suppression of Tiananmen demonstrations, when police control meant you walked on the street, you turned back. My God, didn't I already see that guy yesterday following me? Am I under control? No, today you don't need that. You are, as you said, in front of the screen and you think you are totally free. You are already manipulated. Another more basic point here, we don't have time to go into it, is in some sense, yes, we have avatars, but isn't the lesson of psychoanalysis that, not in this technical sense, but at some more basic sense, in our life, even ordinary life, without any machinery, we already act through avatars. Avatar, in this sense, means, to simplify it, my public image, the way I want others to see me. And here, the relations are very complicated. It's not simply that I act as some role for the others, but deep in me, I am another thing. Quite often, the things are opposite. Then that when you think you are just acting, it's much more truth in what you are doing than in what you think deep in yourself that it's your true self. So these are the problems that I'm dealing with, and I'm very glad that we ended with this, because we live in a magical time. Magical means dangerous, where everyday life pushes us towards becoming philosophers. We have to make choices. Are we free? How the brain works to make everyday decisions about digital control and so on. That's where we are. We live in wonderful, which means extremely dangerous time.
Professor Slavoj Žižek, thank you so much for a wide-ranging and I think fascinating conversation. And once again, the book is Freedom, a Disease Without Cure. So thanks for talking with me.
I'm really grateful to you. Anytime you want to do it again,